Welcome to the Witness History podcast from the BBC World Service. Johnny Hawk is taking us back to 1996, to a tragedy on the slopes of Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world. In 2010, he spoke to one of the survivors, Michael Groom.
It started to cloud in quite quickly, and then I recall some snow falling. I recall some thunderclaps.
It's May 10th, 1996. Michael Groom is at 8,000 metres on the world's highest mountain, and a storm has broken.
The wind, the storm-driven snow had become so intense, the darkness became incredibly confusing, and we were hopelessly lost somewhere on the south of Everest.
Just a few hours earlier, everything had been going well. Michael was working as a commercial guide on an expedition run by his friend Rob Hall. At 10 o'clock on the evening of the 9th, their team set out from Camp 4 on their summit bid.
There was a lot of sparkles in the snow from the full moon sparkling off the ice in the snow, and we made fairly good progress until about dawn. I think we had 8 clients and 3 guides. My role was to set a pace that kept all those people, from the first person, myself, to the back person, which was Rob Hall, within 100 metres of front to back.
When did you realise that things that had started off looking so organised, so simple, if you like, were starting to go wrong?
I had to wait about 45 minutes for Rob to catch up to me on the south summit. And during that time, I noticed that the wind had been picking up considerably on the south summit, to a point when Rob arrived. I actually said to Rob, "Look, I've been waiting here for 45 minutes, and in that time the wind has picked up remarkably, and I'm concerned about it." And he looked down the valley, he looked up to the main summit, and then he finally made an answer. He made his decision. He said, "Oh, look, we'll go on."
So they carried on up. Michael reached the top with one client, Yasuku Namba, then began to descend immediately. As it got later and the weather worsened, other climbers, including Rob Hall, were still heading for the summit. Then Michael came across another of their group, Beck Weathers. He was suffering from snow blindness.
I actually didn't recognise him because he had been sitting so perfectly still in the snow. And he said to me, "Is that you, Mike?" And I looked around to see where his voice was coming from, and suddenly, in what I thought was a bank of snow, appeared Beck Weathers. And that's what he said to me, "Look, Mike, I'm blind." And that's probably when I realised I had a fairly serious undertaking, because we had some fairly steep and technical ground to get back to Camp 4. You've got no choice. I mean, this guy's lost his sight, and you have to be his eyes for him and instruct him almost every step of the way.
As night fell, Michael lost his bearings in the blizzard. In all, 11 climbers from different expeditions were stranded high on the mountain.
My recollections are being so hopelessly lost and confused as to where we were on the mountain, but also knowing that somewhere around us, in a radius of maybe 300 metres, was Camp 4.
So close and yet so far.
Yeah, exactly, so close, yet you couldn't quite figure it out.
And just describe the cold, because that obviously is one of the most dangerous things for climbers very high on mountains.
Yeah, and when you run out of bottled oxygen, it's a bit like someone has put a garden hose into your climbing suit and turned it on, and ice cold water starts to fill up, like just this cold feeling starts to rise from your feet and just overwhelms you.
At 1 in the morning, a break in the storm finally allowed Michael to get his bearings. But could they get back to camp?
I still had Beck Weathers, totally blind, and Yasuko Namba, who was incapacitated. So I had him on one shoulder and Yasuko on the other, and when I had one on one shoulder, the other one would fall off the other shoulder, so I had to pick them up, and it would all start over again. And then after about 30 metres of very slow progress, Yasuko fell over and couldn't go any further, and I thought to myself, what the hell am I going to do here? And then I encouraged her to get back up, and we pushed on for another 10 metres, and then we almost tripped over, I think it was 3 Americans, and one of them said to me, "Look, you're the strongest, we'll wait here, you go on and to Camp 4 and send back help? And I said, no, I'm not leaving Beck and Yasuko. And he said, you have to. We'll stay with them. So off I went, and I stumbled into Camp 4, and I said, look, I've got Beck and Yasuko. They're about 300 or 400 metres that way. I need some help to bring them back into Camp 4. I was pulled into a tent, and I remember sort of people breaking ice off my face and desperately trying to get me warm and shoving me into sleeping bags and cuddling me to get warm. And the next thing I know, it's the morning of the 11th of May, probably around about mid-morning.
Still, the nightmare continued. Not only were his clients Yasuko and Beck missing and presumed dead, but expedition leader Rob Hall was stuck high up on the mountain. Michael could talk to him on the radio, but couldn't save him.
He said to me, how's Beck and Yasuko? One of the biggest mistakes I made on the climb was that I said to Rob, they've passed away. And that must have really shattered Rob, who was trapped up on the south summit.
Michael now had to get the surviving climbers down the mountain, but just before they left camp, he remembers a strange thing happening.
As I checked the tents to get everyone out, I came across a tent that didn't belong to us, and what was strange about it was the front door was open and the back door was open, and the wind was just blowing in one end and out the other. And even more strangely was a pair of mountaineering boots poking out one end. And as I got closer, I realised that connected to these mountaineering boots was a body. The head or the face of the body was covered by a sleeping bag. And I thought, oh, there's another one who didn't make it through the night. So I just walked away and we started our descent down to Camp 3. And about 100 metres above Camp 3, I met two climbers. And they said to me they were going up to Camp 4 to rescue Beck Weathers. And I almost, at that moment, fell off the mountain. In fact, I almost felt like jumping because no one had told me that Beck Weathers had or was at Camp 4, and that dead person that I saw or thought I saw in the tent was actually Beck Weathers, who was still alive. That was just absolutely devastating. No one had told me he was in a tent right next to ours at Camp 4.
Now, you're a professional climber. It's what you love doing. But after the devastation and the death that you witnessed in those 48 hours high on Everest, did you at any point think the price is too high, the cost is too much?
No. My overall view of the expedition was an expedition that was run extremely well and professionally by Rob Hall. A happy expedition, except that on the afternoon of the 10th of May, the wheels fell off a perfectly run expedition.
There's still controversy over exactly what happened on Everest that day. Michael has continued to climb since the tragedy. Beck Weathers survived his ordeal, although he suffered appalling frostbite. Rob Hall and Yasuko Namba both died, and their bodies remain on Everest to this day. A further 6 climbers also died in the same storm.
Michael Groom was talking to Johnny Hogg for the Witness History podcast from the BBC World Service. It was first broadcast in 2010. If you've enjoyed listening, why not leave us a review? And please share it with anyone you think would like to hear it. It really helps us in letting people know about the amazing stories people tell us on Witness History. Thank you. Goodbye.
From the brilliant and bizarre.
It was really surreal. It was a surreal kind of atmosphere there. You couldn't really see anybody.
To the shocking and unexpected.
I'm just wondering, what are we going to do now? This was really my worst fear. He found 100% horse meat that was labelled as beef.
Witness the stories that have shaped our world. Told by the people who were there.
When he went to the factory, the poodle went in front of him, so the workers only knew, oh, the boss is here.
Many people had many things to lose by our victory. The future was not so bright.
Witness history.
We had a designer. He brought in a fully storyboarded idea about how the Queen would arrive by jumping out of a helicopter. And we all said, that's brilliant, but it's never going to happen.
Witness History at bbcworldservice.com/witnesshistory or wherever you get your podcasts.